From the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay, welcome to SuperTalk Outdoors, where, as you well know by now, we celebrate the incredible world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi every single Monday at lunchtime. We want to thank you for joining us on the powerful SuperTalk Mississippi Radio Network. You may be joining us at SuperTalk TV, at C-Spire TV. We appreciate you doing that as well. But if you're listening on Facebook or YouTube or your favorite podcast, it is May the 9th, 2022. As we listen to that wonderful song, the theme song for Super Talk Outdoors, One Mississippi by Steve Azar, the new state song for the state of Mississippi. I'm so happy for Steve. I'm really happy for our state because I think that song is it represents so much positive about our great state. Hey, listen, I didn't do any fishing over the weekend because we were enjoying Mother's Day, celebrating the mothers in my life, my wife and my mother, my wife's mother, my daughter, Tori. It was really a special weekend. The weather was absolutely incredible down on the coast this weekend. The winds offshore now, they weren't so good. It was pretty brisk wind most of the weekend. But when we were riding down the beach yesterday after attending church, it was just beautiful. The water along the beach was super clear, which kind of gave clarity, literally and figuratively, to the reality that flounder gigging the reports of flounder gigging have been really good lately. People have been really enjoying it. You can ride down the beach at night and see all the lights along the shore. They're really enjoying it. Hey, listen, I had the opportunity this past week on Friday, all day Friday, I might add, a planting centipede on the lot we bought next door and are working to improve. And what I discovered is that all these years of doing food plots made me a pretty good centipede grass planter. But, I guess the proof's going to really be in the pudding because, as you probably know, if you don't know, I'll tell you, it takes about 10 to 28 days for centipede to germinate. But, we put the fertilizer out. I spent about 4 hours on a four-wheeler aerating the soil, and then we put the fertilizer and the seeds out. And now it's basically water and wait. We're going to water and wait. But, when I think about it, I think about all this time that I've been waiting for food plots to grow. Can you imagine if we had to wait 28 days for a food plot to grow? It would probably drive us all crazy, wouldn't it? I think it probably would. Hey, one other thing from the coast here. Mississippi red snapper season is plotted to start in 3 weeks. So for recreational fishermen and for charter boats at 12:01 a.m. Friday, May the 27th. And then there's going to be an anticipated mid-season closure. This gives the Department of Marine Resources an opportunity to compile all their data and landing information, and then they'll contemplate whether they'll do an extension or not. They usually do. I've been hearing some incredible reports, though, of huge catch and release snappers. So it's going to be a great season. But that's in 3 weeks. Season kicks off May the 27th. Listen, if you do a search today, you may have actually noted that there was a particular black bear in Mississippi in the news recently. If you go do a search on black bear in Mississippi, what you will find is that there is a lot of information up there. There's a lot of news stories. People going to food plot. One guy in particular where there were 4 bears in his food plot when he got there. People catching incredibly large bears on trail cams. Bears getting into stuff in people's houses and around their houses, and guidance on how to keep that from happening, et cetera. But we've seen a significant increase in bear population in Mississippi. And we're gonna talk more about that in the first half of the show. In the second half of the show, we're going to come to my friend Ricky Flynt, and we're going to talk about alligators. We've been seeing an increase in number and spotting of alligator here in coastal Mississippi, and there's a reason for that. We'll talk to Ricky Flynt about that too, with the upcoming season and all that. So always enjoy catching up with Ricky. So now let's turn to my friend Richard Rummel. He's with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, and he's the new Black Bear Program leader. And first, let me just welcome you to Super Talk Outdoors. How you doing, Richard?
I'm great. Good to be here. Good to be here this morning.
You're at your house. Where are you coming from this morning?
I'm in Flowood, Mississippi. That's my home, but I work statewide with the Bear Program. So I may be on the coast. I may be in Northeast Mississippi. I may be in the Delta. You never know.
Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, and we're going to get into the two genetic types of bear in Mississippi and why there's an increasing number with the influx of females, and there's a lot to talk about there. Before we do that, though, I want to take a step back for a second and learn a little bit more about you, because you and I didn't have the opportunity to meet before the show. We obviously got a chance to chat before we went on live, but tell me, where'd you come from?
Actually, I was born in Ohio because my dad was from there, but I moved down here when I was 1 year old. So I'm a Mississippian, born, I mean, not born, but raised here. So I don't consider myself a Yankee. My whole life has been here in central Mississippi area. And I started with I guess my whole career has been in the wildlife field, whether in captive wildlife. I spent about 15 years in the zoo business here in Mississippi and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Endangered Species Program. I worked with with our state natural heritage program when it was first started back in about 1977. So I'm revealing my age a little bit there. Yeah. But then I've been with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks for 25 years in November. So wow. 40 plus years in the wildlife field.
So, hey, Richard, growing up in central Mississippi, did you always have the outdoors and love of the outdoors and wildlife in your blood?
Yeah, and I kind of think it goes back to, people laugh about it, but when I was a kid, my sister and I growing up, we're just a year apart. My grandmother, who we kind of lived with, she had a local butterfly club. She loved butterflies, and all, my sister and I and all our little friends would come over, and I just grew up with an appreciation for the outdoors, and, went from, kind of started with butterflies and birds and everything. She just had an appreciation and instilled all that in us kids.
Well, that's interesting. So when you joined the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, what did you do initially?
Actually, I also manage the Exotic Species or Inherently Dangerous program, and the state legislature passed a law in 1997 that would regulate the keeping or possession of what we call inherently dangerous animals. That's like big cats, bears, things like that, because there was no state law previously, and there was some concern by a couple of groups that that was kind of getting out of hand. Nobody, there was no animal care, there was no restrictions on who could keep that. So I was hired when that program started. I was hired to kind of get it going up off the ground. So I still do that. That's part of my job.
Well, you do know that the average consumer today, because of Joe Exotic, that series on Netflix,
yeah,
the average consumer is kind of an expert on this today. But there's more awareness of exotic animals today than there was a few years ago, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely, and it's still kind of a concern because people see some of these shows and want to get a pet monkey, or they want to get a baby tiger, or they want to get something that, they should stick with a dog or a cat or a goldfish. It's just they don't realize the responsibility that comes with that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was watching a narco series where El Chapo had, his collection of exotic animals, and then you hear the stories of people like Mike Tyson and his love of exotic animals, but they're dangerous though, aren't they? I mean, it's just basically hard to keep one of those without the danger associated with it.
That's right. People don't realize that a baby tiger grows up to a 400-pound animal, or that a monkey has his own mind, and so it's just, we discourage keeping of exotic animals, although we have regulations that if you want one and certain things, we have permitting requirements, caging requirements, veterinary requirements, and that sort of thing.
Well, that's so interesting. So you've essentially sort of worked in that area most of your career, if not all your career, I guess, huh?
Yeah, and even when I was in the zoo business, I did a lot of contract work with our Natural Science Museum, everything from freshwater mussels to bats, a lot of things like that. So it's not just been captive animals. It's I have an interest in just about everything. I joke with people. Like I said, I spent a lot of years working on our freshwater mussel collection and collecting and surveying around the state with our museum folks, and then ended up in the zoo business training elephants. So there's kind of a lot of critters in between.
You've seen it all. Listen, we're having a conversation with Richard Rummel, who's the new Black Bear Program leader for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. When we come back, we're going to talk about the growing population of black bears and the encounters that people are seeing and the headlines that are coming out of that, and get a sense of what this program is all about. We'll see you after this break.
Leading the conversation on Mississippi's outdoors. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. We're having a conversation with my friend Richard Rummel, who is head of the Black Bear Program for the state of Mississippi. And like I said, if you're not paying close attention, you might think black bear and think of something like the Smoky Mountains, when you go visit the Smokies and you encounter the black bears, et cetera. But what has happened here in Mississippi is that it went from rare sightings from time to time to more frequent sightings more recently. The bear program for the department actually started back in 2002, and we're going to rebuild some of that history with you to give you a sense of the types of bear that are here in Mississippi, and then why are we starting to see more encounters more recently. So let's go back to the beginning. When the program was just starting in Mississippi, what was the goal, Richard?
Well, at that time, as you said, the bear population was growing. The department never had someone fully devoted to studying black bears. We had people going around, and myself was one, and just documenting. We'd get a call from, somewhere and say, I think I found bear tracks. And so we'd travel 2 hours to an area and say, yep, that's bear tracks. So it's basically put a dot on the map, trying to keep track of these things. So that was growing just, exponentially. So the department finally decided, as you said, in 2002, we need somebody full-time devoted to this because the population is growing. Our agency is mandated to manage the wildlife resources of the state. So we knew we needed to get a better handle on the bear population. So position was created in 2002. Brad Young was our initial bear program leader. He spent, I think, about 10 or 11 years with us before moving on. Then it was a little inactive for a couple of years. We still, two things we did. We kept track of sightings to continue on with our database of sightings, which allowed us kind of to monitor where the bears were, as well as any potential human-bear conflicts. In other words, bears getting into my wildlife feeder, or bears come to my backyard and gotten in garbage. So that's one thing that we monitored very closely. I was kind of on the fringes of that, or not full-time, and then a few years later, the department said, well, we need to, get the bear program up and going again. So that's
So, Richard, we're dealing with two basic animals here. One is the American black bear, and one is the Louisiana black bear. Differentiate between the two.
Well, to the average person, there's no difference. It's a taxonomic thing with zoologists. You could have a bear, kind of the dividing line from what's called the Louisiana black bear is basically from the southern 2/3 of the state. The northern third is American black bear. If you had two of them standing side by side, nobody could tell the difference. It goes back to taxonomy and people looking at skulls and measuring skulls and bones and all that sort of thing. So basically, they're they're pretty much one and the same animal.
So let's talk a little bit about the range. What's happened is slowly but surely, I think for a long period of time, if I remember this history right, there were a lot of males here and females have sort of begun to make their way in. What's the range of them, and is it the influx of influx of females that had caused a more recent proliferation? Kind of give us a sense of that.
Yeah, like I said, for so many years, there were males around, and what we found in some of that, this was before really we did any radio collaring and that sort of thing. But if we would get, say, a roadkill, for example, it would be a male, either an adult male or a young male. Now, when cubs are born in January, February, they stay with the mother for about a year and a half till the following summer. At about 17, 18 months old, then mom kicks them out. She's ready to breed again. So at that point, the female cubs tend to stay closer to their mother's home range or their natal range where they were born. The males, on the other hand, kind of hit the road. They wander, and that's typically of carnivores. So a young yearling male may wander 80 miles, 100 miles, 200 miles, kind of looking around for his own home range where there's not a resident breeding male. They're just kind of looking. So most of these sightings we get for so many years were young males. And then as we really have two sources of the recovering population, or what we call recolonizing population in Mississippi. And that is the area in Louisiana, west of Vicksburg, Tensas River National Wildlife Refuge, that area, North Louisiana, has had a very healthy bear population, and which is expanding, continues to expand. And then southeastern Arkansas, pretty much across from Bolivar County, Mississippi, up through there, the North Delta area of the White River National Wildlife Refuge, for years had a very healthy and expanding bear population. So the Mississippi River is no deterrent at all to a bear. They'll come across, and we know from bears that were radio collared in Arkansas, females, swam the Mississippi River. Some we knew that went kind of back and forth. Some actually stayed in Mississippi. We also know across from Wilkinson County down to southwest Mississippi, Louisiana Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was seeking to connect two of the subpopulations of bears in Louisiana. So they moved some of the bears from Tensas area down to a wildlife management area complex, which was adjacent to Wilkinson County.
Yeah.
So they moved females with cubs down there to kind of reconnect those populations. Well, as fate would have it, some of the females, at least two we know of, swam the Mississippi River over into into Mississippi, bred and had cubs there. So a majority of our population that's recolonizing the western part of the state along the Mississippi River has come from Arkansas and Louisiana. But we're also seeing now on the eastern border, lower Alabama, kind of the Mobile River Basin, has a growing population. So we know some of the bears that we're seeing in the southeastern part of the state are coming in from Alabama.
It's so interesting to me to see just how this is proliferating. One of the interesting points that probably has helped you a lot with the advancing technology of trail cams, and obviously everyone has a cellular camera today. That probably has increased the number of data points you guys have, exponentially compared to 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Oh, it's incredible. And that's a part of my job that can be overwhelming. As you said, it's great because there's so many cameras in the woods, these days. So we're getting people send us trail camera pictures. I get texts, somebody will text me a picture on my phone. I'll say, okay, where is this? We get people calling in, we get people reporting. We also have a reporting app on our agency webpage, which we encourage people to use. If you go to mdwfp.com and look on the Black Bear page, you see report a sighting, and you can click in, you can go to a map, you can, as much detail as you can fill in. And trying to keep track of all that information can be overwhelming at times because you get so many different origins.
Right.
But that's, we want that. That's helping us keep track of where the bears are, where they're moving. We're getting pictures of females with cubs in areas of the state that haven't seen that in decades.
Right. So, hey, listen, we're coming to the end of the segment, so I want to make sure that we give people, you mentioned it just a second ago, but the main thing is if someone sees a bear in their yard or begins to sense a nuisance bear of some sort or just has a sighting in particular, what should they do?
Okay, one of the first things is like I said, you can go to our app. We'd appreciate that because that really helps us keep track of it. But one of the things that we encourage is when bears bear managers try to get away from the word nuisance. We tend to use bear-human conflicts or potential conflicts. And the main reason for that is attractants. If you have garbage in your yard or anything like that, wildlife feeders can be anything. Try to remove the attractants. You can go to our webpage. Bearwise.org is a fantastic resource. Try to manage bears. We have good.
Yeah, no, we're coming to the end, but this has been Richard Rummel. He's head of the Black Bear Program in Mississippi. But if you see a bear, report it. That's the point. You go do a Google search. You can find all the processes that you need to go through to do the reporting. And we'll check back in with Richard and talk about some of the encounters that we've had in Mississippi along the way in a few weeks. Look forward to talking back to you, Richard.
Sure. Glad to join you.
When we come back, we'll have Ricky Flynt, and we're going to talk alligators. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to SuperTalk Outdoors. I really enjoyed that conversation. Kyle and I were talking about during the break, you don't get a sense that Mississippi would be a place where you'd see a lot of black bears, but so interesting. I mean, I guess if you pay close attention to recent headlines, you sort of understand that there are more encounters with bear. I like the way he said it, that they don't like to look at bears as a nuisance, more of a conflict with humans, and the work that we need to do to reduce the conflict that we might have with them. But the notion that a male bear would go up to 200 miles as they roam around looking for sort of what their home range is going to be, and a couple of females swimming across the Mississippi River and then breeding and having cubs in Mississippi. No wonder there are so many bears being caught on trail cams these days. What an interesting conversation. We're going to have him back actually in a few weeks and talk more about some of the headlines that we're seeing and how the department is dealing with those, because we've seen an increased number of those. So now let's shift gears. We're going to move over to my friend Ricky Flynn. He's a wildlife coordinator with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. He's a fur bearer, head of the Alligator Program. He's a nuisance wildlife program coordinator. He's done it all. He's been on SuperTalk Outdoors. I think this would be his third appearance, and he's also been with me on my show on the Coast View. But without any further ado, let me say good morning to you, my friend. How you doing?
Good morning. Good to see you.
Or should I say afternoon, for goodness sakes. Anyway, it's good to see you, man. You been busy?
I have been. It's, when it's spring, it starts to get a little more active. The alligators are waking up from their dormant period over the winter, and they're starting to get a little more active, and that results in some more work and some more activity, more calls, and also getting ready for the upcoming alligator hunting season. So there's plenty to do.
There is plenty to do. Just along the coast, Over in Ocean Springs, a sighting of a really, really big one. The Mayor Kenny Holloway from Ocean Springs was on his boat at Point Cadet Marina in Biloxi and sent a picture of one they saw there in the marina. And then, of course, there's been a sighting or two along Front Beach. But that doesn't surprise you, as you said, they wherever they go to sort of hold up for the winter, they're now out and about. And, you expect that you're going to get a bunch of calls this time of year, don't you?
Yeah, so it is the breeding season we're going into right now. It's already started. It'll probably peak out in the month of May and June. And with that, these male alligators are going to be moving around looking for willing females. And during that time, they can travel quite some distance. People kind of think of alligators staying in the same place all the time, but we know, at least in some instances, they can move as much as 52 miles.
Wow. Did you collar one? Is that how you know that?
Yeah, we've been placing marking tags on alligators since 2007, right after we started our first alligator season in 2005, in an effort to try and get some mark recapture data about how far alligators move, how much they grow. And since 2007, the program has captured, tagged, and released over 800 alligators in that time across the state. And we get quite a few recaptures during the alligator hunting season, but we also get some ourselves as we capture and remove alligators, nuisance alligators, alligators that are out of place. And we had one particular one that we tagged over near the Eagle Lake vicinity. I don't remember what year it was, but it was probably around 2014, 15, somewhere in that area. And it was later taken by a nuisance alligator trapper in the state of Arkansas up near Lake Shaco.
Wow.
In Lake Providence, Arkansas. So I say Lake Providence, Louisiana, excuse me.
Yeah.
And so I think straight line miles, it was about 35 or so miles straight line. But if you looked at the waterways and the path of least resistance through the water, it was probably in the neighborhood of about 52 miles that alligator traveled.
I remember you and I talked about this before, but I think people always are curious about it. So let's remind people. We don't have a history of alligators attacking people in Mississippi. You've got one news article from way back. Kind of let people know that they're not like a shark that you're gonna see regular attacks. But give a sense of what your thoughts are on the likelihood that an alligator is going to attack a human.
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, people have access to a lot of media. You can go all across this world, and if a child 6 years old to an adult has access to television and the internet, there's two wildlife species that just about everyone in the world knows something about, and that's sharks and alligators. And unfortunately, alligators and sharks both get a bad rap. There's a lot of drama that is easy to be produced around them because they are apex predators and they are capable of attacking humans. Although that is extremely rare. If you think about the number of alligators that are out there and the close proximity that they exist within human populations. And so Mississippi has never had a documented case in modern history. There is some records from an old newspaper in the late 1800s that recorded an alligator attack in your region down there in the Gulf Coast. It's very loose details about it. But other than that, we've never had a documented case of an alligator attacking a human in the state of Mississippi. Has it happened other places? Yes, in Florida it happens. They've had about, I think, in the neighborhood of 40 or so fatalities since the 1940s. But the alligator population in Florida is tremendously larger than that in Mississippi, and the human population is tremendously greater than what it is in Mississippi, and they exist and coexist in the same areas. In Florida, if there's water and land nearby, then they're gonna produce homes and businesses and things around the waterways, and so it's subject to happen. And to some degree, on coastal Mississippi, we have to deal with that. And then here in the Jackson area around Ross Burnett Reservoir, there is close proximity of alligators and humans all the time. But yet we have very few even incidences at all. And usually if it happens, it happens around like you're talking about a marina or a boat dock, fishing piers and things like that. And they're becoming associated with a source of food. And unfortunately, we have people that will throw food out for alligators, and that becomes a very dangerous situation. It is illegal, and we will enforce it for obvious reasons. So I think Louisiana documented one attack here just in the last couple of years, and just about in every case, Florida, Louisiana, other states, I think South Carolina has had a fatality. It's almost always associated with people who are swimming in areas where alligators are known to exist, in particular doing it at night, and or in areas where alligators have been fed by people. And so that becomes a recipe for danger.
Yeah, I think about, I do a lot of fishing, and so off the Barry Islands, it could be wade fishing in Cat Island or Horn Island or even in the Chandelier Islands. And it's not unusual to be fishing and within 50 yards have a 6 to 10 foot alligator just kind of hanging out. And we got used to it over the years. It's a little unnerving when they go under because you don't know which way they're going. But they're I mean, basically they are just as leery of us as we are of them, aren't they?
Yeah, they're in areas where there's a lot of recreation, particularly fishermen, water skiing and things like that. Alligators become a little more tolerant of people just by association, but they still have a natural fear of human activity, and they will avoid us. Those younger alligators, those in that 4 to 6 foot range, they kind of have a little bit of a curiosity to human activity, and they may come a short distance away, but then they stay a safe distance away at the same time. And we deal with nuisance alligator complaints. Those calls are starting to ramp up now as alligators are becoming more active. They're more visible this time of year because the aquatic vegetation hasn't quite built up to hide those alligators where they exist. And then we'll deal with those calls individually. And some of those calls do result in us having to catch them and remove them.
When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Ricky Flynn. I want to talk about I want to hear about nesting and what we should avoid as it relates to nesting now that we're into the breeding season. And then we'll also talk about the upcoming alligator permitting that's going to happen in June. We'll see you after this. Sweet soul for him. I said 3 Mississippi to this land called home. I'll breathe Mississippi till I'm dead and gone. Just carry on. I'll carry on.
We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the outdoors. So let's talk about it. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. We have Ricky Flynn, who's the Wildlife Coordinator, who's head of the Alligator Program at the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And when we went to the break, we were just explaining why it's that time of year. Alligators are getting out. They've been sort of laying low for the whole winter. They're in the stage of life where they're trying to multiply, and you'll see some nests. Talk about nesting of alligators. Is it similar to what you would see in a bird nest?
Well, birds and alligators have some relation characteristics. But alligator nesting is very different. Alligators are cold-blooded, whereas birds, avians are warm-blooded. So when an alligator builds a nest and lays its eggs, it does not incubate the eggs by laying on top of the nest or laying on top of the eggs. Alligators, which we talked about, we're in the breeding season now. We will see these adult females start building home range around an area where they have chosen to build a nest. The nest is usually located within about 15 to 20 feet of the water's edge on dry land. And that in Mississippi usually occurs in the last week of June and the first week of July. And they will build up, scratch up all the material, whether it's live vegetation, dead vegetation, leaf litter, woody material, vines. I've even seen trash, Coke bottles and things like this be brought into an alligator nest. But they will hip that material up along with some dirt into a pile. It's usually about 6 feet across at the base, and initially will be about 2 to 2.5 feet deep or 2.5 feet high. They'll use their hind legs to excavate a hole in the middle of this heap, and they'll deposit their eggs, on average about 35 to 40 eggs into the nest. They'll cover them back up. And what happens is that live vegetation, dead vegetation, moist soil, dry soil, and all this woody material begins to decompose, much like a compost pile that you would have for your garden. And that decomposition creates heat. That heat that is inside this heap of pile of material is what actually incubates the eggs. And that will take place for about 65 to 70 days. And during that time, the female will stay very close to the nest and protect it from predators that may come to try and predate upon the eggs that are there. And so this is really the only time of the life cycle of an alligator that they are particularly aggressive towards people if you come in close proximity of a nest. Most of the time, that's actually fairly rare because the location that these alligators choose is usually away from people. It's usually away from other types of activity. They choose it to put it in a safe site. But I have seen alligators build nests right along the side of a gravel road, right along near a public park or boat ramp or fishing area. It can happen. And I've actually seen some of these nests so close to people that you would think, how would they not know that there's an alligator there? But at the same time, the alligator does not show any aggression towards people who come close by. I work every year. I locate wild alligator nests up here on the Pearl River near Ross Barnett Reservoir. And I may find and visit these alligator nests multiple times through the summer, anywhere from 12 to 20 nests each year. And I find that about 10% of those females will at least stay near the nest while I'm there conducting my activities. And only about 10% of that 10% are very aggressive. Sometimes some of these nests, I never even see the adult female until after the nest is hatched. And that hatching process usually begins mid-August, late August. Sometimes it will extend into September. But it's a very unique activity. It's a very cool thing to see and witness. We've actually set up remote cameras to document the alligator nest hatching process. It's just a unique event.
So we got just a couple of minutes left. So let's before we get away, let's talk about what's going to happen with the alligator permitting session. We got less than a minute. Real quick, give the key dates and where people can go to learn more information.
Yeah, so everybody knows, most people know about the alligator hunting season that we have on public waterways in the state of Mississippi. It is a statewide opportunity. We take applications during the first week of June. So you can go to our website from 10 a.m. June 1st through 10 a.m. June 8th. Submit your application. We'll do a drawing for that. You'll get an email notification if you're a winner. You go online to the link and buy your permit at that point.
There you go. Short and sweet. Ricky Flynt, you're good on the air. We really appreciate you. And I look forward to coming back and getting an update about how the permitting process is going. Take care, my friend.
All right, y'all too.
It's been great. Thank you for joining us here on Super Talk Outdoors. And as usual, like I always say, stay safe, stay safe. God bless you, and we'll see you next Monday. Mississippi to this land called